Back in the KSI Huddle, it's an opportunity to ask questions. No such thing as a irrelevant question. We'll do our best to serve you, and we'll stop as soon as the questions are exhausted. So who's first?
Sort of, I have a question for Mike.
Did you apologise, David? Oh, you just said sorry? You didn't say sorry. Oh, sort of. Okay. Just have it a bit apologetic. Keep going.
Okay. I'm happy to answer a sort of question.
I have a firm question for you. With your talk, you discussed a lot about establishing a culture and allowing your athletes to find, or guiding your athletes, in that culture. At what point do you kind of, spoon feed is not the right word, but kind of gently push versus come and say, hey, this is how we're going to do it? Like when you start seeing it get kind of getting out of hand, like where do you go from the point of encouraging the formation of a culture versus saying this is how we have to do it?
So it's really about establishing a standard, right? And being firm on that standard. So you establish the standard in a way and at a level that everyone can achieve, and then you work to go from there. Okay? So an example may be if you were to establish a standard that's way too high, and you've got people that can't come close to that standard, you'll have more that fall off, and you might not gain any traction. That's the challenge. It's just the choice that you have to make. So you might not gain any traction and any forward momentum. So if I come in with a group, and there'll be things that you do in the early stages of your coaching that you might never have to do again. So you can come into a group, set a standard that's achievable, right? And then once you've established that standard, you can continue to raise it over time.
So cultural change is also timeline dependent. If you've got a short period of time, you have to bang it a bit harder. It's not always effective long term. It's best if you have time to do a little bit more progress.
I have a question for you, Mike, about having being responsible for a strength and conditioning, athletic preparation, and athletic enhancement environment for the entire college. Obviously, you have some programs that are successful and some that weren't as successful. Yet you're training in both of them. I'm wondering what common denominator you saw in the teams that had winning records, and maybe not just one given year, but maybe every college has their successful programs and their rebuilding programs.
Well, I think that's a true measurement of success is their consistency in achieving something. That's when the culture is established. That's when there's consistency in coaching. That's when you have you've got that kind of autonomy throughout. The programs that are less successful or have years that are really erratic. They're up one year, they're down another. You don't have those cultures. You don't have that continuity from year to year, and that's a coaching challenge. Yeah. It's not necessarily a team or a personnel challenge.
So was there a dominant or obvious coaching trait, either from an individual head coach or the staff, that you saw that, man, these guys get it, or these girls get it, and this is going to be fun working with this culture that this coach is trying to produce? When
you say guys and girls get it, is that the athlete or is that the coach?
The coach and the staff. The coach and the staff. Okay.
With the coach, it's their openness as a person to learning and seeing things. As a physical preparation coach, we talked about it. We have the benefit of probably spending the most time with the athletes. So spending more time with the athletes, your relationships with the athletes run a lot deeper. So when a coach is open to learning as a result of the relationships that I have with athletes, they probably stand the best chance. Do you remember all that?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Excellent.
In the world of tension reducing, you guys consider meditation in that arena?
What do you think?
I would venture yes, but I'm interested to hear your opinion on it.
Why?
Because you're Dean King. Well, I mean,
That's good, that's good, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
What's meditation?
Meditation is,
Because whenever we dialogue, it's important we're on common ground and definition.
yeah, okay, no, that's good, that's good. I would consider meditation, you know, just, a specific time where you are sitting down, quieting your mind. I mean, it can, you know, some people suggest, you know, focusing on something, some people suggest emptying your mind. I mean, you know, different things
So the
work.
common denominator, there's one common denominator in all definitions, what's that?
Taking the amount of time to sit down and quiet your mind in some manner.
Well, there's two, there's time and quietness, which one is it? What's the most common denominator?
Quietness.
Fantastic, so basically zip it, your mouth is shut. Yeah? Is that, are we good with that being the most common denominator in the meditation?
Yes.
Okay. So there are many schools of thought as far as the specifics of meditation. We have strategies that I don't intend to expand upon at this level. We have strategies that would fall within the majority of definitions, and they're used extensively. But we don't call them that. Just to be real clear, we were doing things like control drills before the word Pilates became known. We were doing stretching before the word yoga became popular. So I'm very conscious not to have what we've organically evolved with to be perceived as synonymous with buzzwords. And I'm not critical of Pilates, yoga and meditation.
Right.
It's just the public perception of them as an activity. We try to avoid that the stereotypical interpretation.
Like mobility,
Yeah,
flexibility.
that's shit, yeah. So, it is a significant part of recovery. I will give you one example, however. We do not allow music in our training environment. Which is just something I can, and that's not always been popular. You know, the athletes who want to rebel will contest that, and I say, you know, you can put an earphone in if that's your choice. But nothing by an individual is allowed to damage the cultural intent. An individual has choice, the culture does not. So that's something we can expand on, definitely. But not, I mean, my question again to you, you raising that, I mean, would you have asked me that question 20 years ago? You don't have to answer, but you understand where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
When I get questions that are reflective of dominant trends, then I probably struggle a little bit to retain my cynicism. Because our goal is to be, to provide the best opportunities for an athlete to succeed, and to do so we need to be so far ahead of the curve
Yeah.
that when people start raising things that we've been doing for a long time, we you know, the best thing we can do is keep a straight face.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. I mean,
But yes, it's a big part.
Yeah, I've been experimenting with meditation since about the mid-90s, so I guess I would have 20 years ago.
Excellent.
But, yeah, I was just curious,
Yeah.
in the world of tension reducing, there's not, the options are, or not as many options as there are for tension reducing things, or at least in my
I'm glad you clarified that. Do you understand? The extension of that sentence was very important. The disclaimer you just added was critical.
yeah,
Because initially, as a statement of fact, in isolation, it would have been something that would be warranting further discussion. But I'm glad you clarified that. So, what's your mind and what's your knowledge base is a reflection of mainstream, and you're completely accurate with that statement. But that's not a statement that I would share because we have a different tool to draw from. Because as you understand, we just don't talk about recovery, and there are many tools.
yeah.
Excellent, great stuff.
You mentioned earlier about that a KSI coach can pretty much help with any sport. So is there a basic philosophy for the GPP? What would it say? What would that, for strength training, what would that be?
For strengthening, relative to the sport or strengthening in general?
I guess it would be, because the GPP is for non-specific. So let's say for a GPP for combat sports.
Right. The common theme for all GPPs, and Mitchell did touch upon that in his presentation, the common theme for all GPPs is to do the things that we're not able to do during the competitive period that will serve us in the competitive period and long term. So if there's something that needs to be done with priority, in other words, we need to pull back on our sport-specific activities, and we know that we wouldn't want to turn around and compete, in that frame because we may lose touch a little bit. So we place the highest competitive requirements in maintenance, and we focus on the most non-specific yet still serving qualities. So what I typically do with athletes is seek to have a very solid GPPs early in their career, in the recognition that as their qualification advances, as they get better and better, that their GPP will be shorter and more irregular. So our first few GPPs are a massive investment in the future, massive investment, and they take years and years to come through. But they're just beautiful things. Nothing changes an athlete more than a GPP. And as I said, it's not always apparent immediately because you need time for the qualities from GPP to be mixed with the specific sporting qualities to come through. But it doesn't take long for them to shine. And athletes who do not apply a successful, effective GPP will rarely see significant performance enhancement from year to year. So the sacrificing of a GPP is very common. And I can understand it at the high level with an athlete who's paid their dues. But I cannot understand it with any athlete who has not paid their dues in GPP. In other words, you will not change adequately unless you have a GPP. And the definition of a GPP for us is a de-emphasizing of your specific qualities. You're allowed to stay in touch, but that's it. And that's something that some struggle with, because one of the greatest mistakes in program design from an annual or multi-year perspective in sport is that they want to do their sports-related activities all year long. You see, the coach wants to see it every week so they can have the emotional confidence, yes, we've got it. And I say this, if we see it on the training paddock, guess what? We're probably not going to see it in the competition. So if you have to see it all the time, you're not going to see it when you're there. Great question.
Supplement, basic supplement recommendations, maybe.